Behold, my glorious supporter 3Fast5Me has requested some discussion about, well, I spoiled it from the beginning, didn't I? I ruined the whole, well, there it is, net decking. For you see, I think that net decking spoils it ahead of time as well. Well, we'll get into that in a moment. 3Fast5Me basically asks, how do you net deck in a way that's actually fun, productive, good, all of those things? How do you net deck and sort out the chaff, like not invest in a deck that just is bad? How do you net deck and find something that you find fun? How do you get into Magic without reinventing the wheel or inventing a new type of vehicle all by yourself, basically? Cool. Yeah, I feel like there are kind of two different ways to answer this. The first one is mindset, and the second one is resources, and I should say the second one first. Yeah, there are a lot of sites like MTG Goldfish, or there's like an MTG Top 8 or something. There are some good websites that collate decks and sort them, sometimes by how well they did, but we'll get back to that in a minute. Often by archetype, but that's going to be stated by the player, by color. But what I would recommend you do is look on Scryfall. Scryfall is a very good Magic the Gathering card searching engine, and look up some of the most recent sets and look at all the cards and find cards you like. Go through, right-clicking them and clicking open a new tab, and then at the end you'll have a bunch of tabs with these cards, and then look through them. Are there any of them that you're comparatively disinterested in now? Just get rid of those, then save them. Do any of these cards work well together? Just build that deck. You'd save yourself some time. Maybe you'll see a card and think, this is really interesting, but I can't really think of, where you would, what an odd card. And maybe looking up decks online will help you find decks with that card that use it in an interesting way. Maybe a card is expensive and that catches your attention and you think, well, what on earth? This seems like sort of bad. Why is this expensive? And then you can look up decks that card's in to understand it a little bit better. Think about what the deck might be trying to do. Think about basic ways decks win. Aggro, adapting to the tempo of the opponent, tempo, control, things like that, ramp. And think about what strategy this deck seems inspired by. Maybe it's a combo deck. This is a lot easier to do in standard. A lot of decks, once you get to modern and legacy, use more abstract interpretations of those concepts that are less like it's harder to just glance at the cards having never seen them. Often for those decks, you need to read every single card in the deck or you'll have no idea what it does. In standard, that's often not true. So that's something. If we're talking about Commander, net decking for Commander, the biggest thing is to ignore the specifics. Commander decks are almost always built with a lot of redundancy, so you want to look at the deck and look for ideas, individual card ideas. You're not trying to grab whole chunks of the deck. That's never going to make sense. You should just use what you have or what's in your budget. You should look at it and take ideas from it, use it as a source of ideas, and understand that a lot of cards in like a commander deck might just be the person's pet card. They just like that card. It might make sense, but it's just not particularly amazing and they just like that card. Doesn't mean it's a bad choice, just might mean you care a little bit less about it, that's all. So I think that's one thing. The easy answer that you don't need to go to me for is to go to those websites, to read through sets, newer sets, and look for cards that you like, that you're interested in, and play them. Find a way to play them. Find decks that do play them. Searching for decks rather than by how well they did, rather than by strategy or something. By card. Look for them by card. Search for a deck you want to play by finding cards you want to play. Because after all, and this gets into the mindset thing, you and almost all of us are not, we know, going to be a successful competitive Magic player. And it's hard because there's this thing that happens where you want to feel like you're playing something that when you play, you want to feel like if you lose, it's because you lost, not because the deck couldn't have won, right? I think that's a weakness of Magic overall, just as an aside, that it is often hard to parse that out. But looking up a deck that you know is good, that you want to play, that you have fun playing, is beneficial, even if you know you're never going to be a successful player, because it gets that out of the way. It makes you stop worrying about that. You don't have to worry about that. You can move on and not be upset about that. So that's one thing. But again, getting into this second thing, there is something to be considered about format. I think net decking, having that feeling of like wanting to be confident that you could have won, if that bothers you, it might be the way you're playing Magic rather than how you think about Magic or the deck you're playing. It might be that you should play more limited, where it is usually pretty fair. I mean, people will have a bomb, but 9 times out of 10, you can kill it with a removal spell. So it's fair. I mean, you could have won if you play limited. It's very rare that you will play a game of especially sealed, mostly sealed, I guess, and you like somehow had very little chance. Like, no, you could have won, and then you can stop worrying about that and just play, build decks and play. Magic Arena can be an okay place for this. I think it's really fun to do with friends if they're around. Increasingly, that is safe for people to go do. So if you can, you should go do that. But yeah, so that's one thing. Commander. So there's another question coming right after this about Commander, and I am going to talk about one of my Commander decks. But something that I've done, this is kind of a weirder abstract solution, is I just made a bunch of Commander decks that are curated against each other. Like they should have, it's kind of like that old product they did, dual decks that were supposed to be good against each other. They often weren't. This is that, but for Commander decks, there are just a lot more of them. I made like 16 more, I think, a lot. And they're curated, they're designed to be good matches against one another rather than, some other abstract anyway. And so that can be a solution. Having decks that you sort of know your friends are acting in good faith will be like a decent match for each other. That can be a better way to fulfill that goal. Sometimes just not playing with matchmaking can be a better way to fulfill that goal. Feeling like you, or swapping decks even, so you both have a chance to, if you feel one deck is better, you can at least find out at the very least. That's a thing. So yeah, I think those are things to consider. Yeah, and kind of as I mentioned in a previous parlay, this came at a very good time in the middle of two that are related to it, in the midst of two that are related to it. I also think that looking up decks on the internet can just be entertaining sometimes to see like what weird stuff people are getting up to. And a really fun thing that I've had a lot of success with in my time playing Magic, especially at low-ish levels of play where people look up decks, but where the player is not necessarily going to innovate on the deck in some way. There's a lot of known information. You can often have a lot of fun making anti-meta decks at that level, especially if there's sideboarding involved in your format. You can often make a deck that is designed to be kind of like a okay chance against everything, just as some powerful cards. But then secretly, it transforms into a deck that counters this deck that it would be bad against. That can often be a little difficult to design, but a good amount of the time you can brew up a strategy that's just a cocktail of cards that are good against the decks that people think are good, and have a good time with those decks, and then finding a way to fit the cards that you picked out from reading through the set that are fun. I think that is one of the most effective ways to utilize net decking, to just know what people are playing and then know which cards you're interested in have a good chance of doing well. I think that's a strong approach. So I hope that helps. I hope that you play some excellent games of, I know I focused on Magic, but that applies to a lot of things. Certainly, I think the last thing, and I did emphasize this a little, is like, just don't have too much faith in the player. They don't know the thing is the best option. They're not right. They just have an idea. Take it as an idea. Kill your darlings and kill their darlings, most of all. The player is not an authority. They're just another collaborator. And if they're seen as anything else, then they will lead you astray. So don't take it too seriously. Make sure you're having fun. I probably don't need to tell you that, but anyway, happy hunting.